being held in the council chamber and via Microsoft Teams on Thursday, the 15th of February 2024. Just to confirm that this meeting will be live streamed and recorded and made available to view via the council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals present and or speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the council's website. If members lose connection during the meeting, please make every attempt to reconnect. However, the meeting will continue as long as it remains quorate. Committee services staff are available and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. I wish to also remind everyone that the chair has the discretion to terminate or suspend the webcast if, in their opinion, continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings or that continued webcasting might infringe the rights of any individual. The chair also has the right to remove persons from the physical and from the digital meeting link if that is necessary. Members attending remotely, please leave on your cameras but mute your microphones. Members attending physically, please use the microphones in the chamber when you are called on to speak. Members and officers should only activate their microphone after the chair has invited them to speak on an item. The business today, we'll be using Microsoft Forms to vote on agenda items 3, 4, 6 and 9, where the voting poll will appear and then members are asked to click on for, against or abstain and then click on submit vote. If you have any problems accessing the voting pop-up, please indicate and your vote can be taken verbally. So I'll now go through a roll call of members attending. Councillor Adams.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Aldworth.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Broughton Pettit. Oh, apologies, sorry. Councillor Chapman Dawson.
Sorry, I was trying to get the phone to stop ringing before I spoke. I'm present, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Davis. Councillor Enright.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Taylor.
I'm not present.
Councillor Wright.
Present.
Thank you. And then the lay members, Nigel Yates.
Present.
I'm present. Viv Pearson.
Present, Chair.
And we've got apologies from Joe Williams. I won't go through the names of all of the officers, if that's okay. And we've got colleagues from Audit Wales. Anthony Veal.
Yeah, if I could come in, I've just checked the people logged onto the call and I can't actually see anybody from Audit Wales.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
they were obviously aware of the meeting, but for some reason nobody's logged on.
Okay. Well, if they are trying to get in, and we get to that point on the agenda and they haven't joined us, if with permission of the meeting we go through the rest of the agenda, and if at some point it's confirmed that the Audit Wales team are with us, we can proceed with that. Is that okay with everybody?
Chair.
Hello.
Councillor Liz Aldworth here. I can see on my list we have Brodie Thompson as a guest. Is she from Audit Wales?
Good afternoon.
No, I think she's.
No, I'm
Councillor.
I'm here for Ben Stanley's replacement.
Okay,
Head of
thank you.
Property Services. Sorry.
That's okay. So we've noted the apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Please use hands up function to indicate if you have any such declarations. Can't see anything, so if we're content with that, that's fine. Okay, agenda item 3, to approve and sign the minutes. Sorry. To approve and sign the minutes for accuracy of the Governance and Audit Committee meeting held on the 7th of November 2023, pages 1 to 5. Can we have someone to move and to second the minutes?
Can I move, Nigel Yates?
Thank you, Nigel. Seconder?
Mike
Second,
Adams will
Chair.
second.
Okay,
Marine put her hand up.
yeah, we've, okay. The poll will appear on the screen and in the show conversation, and click on it to vote for, against, or abstain. That's 100% for. Thank you. Agenda item 4, Governance and Audit Committee Forward Work Programme. Steve Harris is to present that. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, the Forward Work Programme has been populated for the first 6 months of the calendar year. For the next meeting, we will be looking to extend that out for a further 6 months. So if there are any requests for reports to be added, they can be requested today. Or if not, obviously outside of the meeting, we can take on any suggestions for reports to be added moving forward. We've also included an updated action sheet. You know, that's something we introduced a couple of months ago, and we've tried to show the status of current actions. So again, happy to take any questions on that, and any actions arising from today's meeting will be added to the action list moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Gary Enright, you've got a question.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very brief one, if I may. It's on the action sheet, page 15. It's the update of the policies. Can we have a date on there to conclude that activity, please? Thanks very much.
Yeah, Councillor Enright, I'll pick that up with Lynn Donovan, Head of HR, and we'll see if we can provide some dates when we next submit the action sheet. Thank you.
I can't see anyone else wanting to comment or ask a question. So we note the Forward Work Programme and agree any changes as we've just discussed. Could someone move and someone second?
I'll move, Chair. Councillor Adams. I'll
Second,
second, Nigel Yates.
Thank you. So wait for the polling pop up now. Okay, that's been carried. Thank you. So agenda item 5, update from Audit Wales. Are we still okay? Okay, so we'll park that just for now. And we'll go on to agenda item 6, which is the draft annual self-assessment report 2022-23. Dave Street, Deputy Chief Executive, and Ros Roberts here to present that report. Thank you. Who wants to?
It looks like I've had greatness thrust upon me, Chair, so there you go. Good afternoon, members. The self-assessment that you have in front of you is actually a legislative requirement, something that we have to produce as a result of the Local Government and Elections Act. It's very much about keeping our performance under review, not just for a single year, but actually being aware of what's going on and continually monitoring our performance in a number of different ways, and very much centres around our desire to continue to be a learning organisation. To actually, identify and celebrate those areas where we believe our performance is strong, but obviously to identify those areas where we are not so strong or we've got problems, and actually to put actions in place to make sure we rectify those as quick as we possibly can. I think the key to any kind of self-assessment, and I've done a number of self-assessments in my career, and I think one of the things you can get thrown you on occasions is about councils marking their own homework. So it is very much around those judgments we make being evidence-based and how we actually are able to do that on a sustained basis. So any conclusions we draw, whether it be positive or negative, are actually evidenced in hard data, hard fact that we can share with members or indeed members of the public. In terms of the content and structure of the report, there's no real guidance from Welsh Government. The report can be 3 pages, it could be 500 pages. That's ultimately down to us. But certainly it's a question of quality rather than quantity is what we aim for in this. So we like our reports to be as succinct as they can possibly be in the circumstances, but equally quite meaningful in terms of scrutiny and members' oversight of that. One of the key things for us is the fundamentals behind this report is the ongoing performance assessment that we do within the council day in, day out and month in, month out. So every directorate has a directorate performance assessment, which goes to its management team every quarter, looking at those key conditions, those key performance criterias, and how well or otherwise that directorate's done against those. And those are then summarised on a quarterly basis to come to the council's corporate management team via a corporate performance assessment. And it's that corporate performance assessment that we actually then take into members, into scrutiny committees, etc., etc. So a really key piece of work for us moving forward. It's always a dilemma when you're measuring your performance. The natural tradition, I suppose, or natural inclination is to measure quantity, how many things we do, and on occasions, how quickly we do them. But of course, one of the things that vexes us in that is very much about what are the outcomes of our actions. So putting my old social services hat on, we would certainly measure how many assessments we've done, for example, and how quickly we've done those assessments. But one of the key things is what has been the outcome of those assessments. Has the outcome of those assessments mean that those vulnerable people who have contacted us have actually had their needs met? Now, that's a bit of a balancing act, because on the other hand, of course, you could have very good assessments that meet outcomes of people, but it's no good if those assessments are done 6 months after they should be. So that balance between quantity and quality is something that we wrestle with quite frequently. On balance, we think the self-assessment that's in front of you this afternoon shows that we've performed well in what is still a financially challenging environment, an environment that, of course, will become more challenging as the next months and years go on. But we would welcome your comments and queries around that in due course. And really going forward, I think we want to build on the 2022-23 performance assessment, self-assessment in 3 main areas. To review the framework and test it, there is still a good way to assess our performance. How we implement greater engagement in that judgment process. And finally, to add a summary judgment section. So obviously officers are here, myself and other officers are here to answer any questions the members may have. But Ros, is there anything that I've missed out that you'd like to add?
No, that's well covered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Ros, for bringing this report together. And thank you, Dave, for standing in for the Chief Executive, who I understand is not well. So please pass on our best wishes, okay? Got a series of questions. Councillor Gary Enright, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick one, and this sounds really petty, I got to be honest, but you'd think of 51 pages, you would think of something more to say than just picking up on certain words. I've already had a brief conversation with Ros on this one. It's just the term that's being used in regards to citizens through the document, and I think it appears about 6 or 7 times through it, and I'm struggling with it, to be fair, because when I think of citizens, I think of more of that national approach, that sort of macro approach, you know, I belong to Wales, that kind of thing. Whereas this is a localized document, and hopefully we are going to get residents to read it, you know, embrace it and all that kind of stuff. So I think personally we need to be thinking about the wording that we're using. And, you know, when I think of residents, I think of people living in the borough, paying the bills, working in that particular area. So it's just a request, really. Not much can probably be done on this particular version, but moving forward, whether we can think about the terms and the wording that we're using. I understand it's in the Chief Executive's piece as well, which is fine. You know, that's the Chief Executive's piece, and we can't amend that. That's the words that she wants to put forward. But I think through the document, I think if we think of the wording that we are choosing, I think, yeah, it might help. Anyway, it's just grating on me. I got to be honest. Apologise, Chair.
No need to apologise, Councillor Enright. Would Dave or Ros want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. I see that, but the point you're making is something we can consideration. We've always struggled with this for years, if I'm honest. I think probably it's my social services background. When I think of residents, I think of people who are in those sort of care facilities, in hospitals, etc. So if you've got a form of words or a term that people think would help us overcome that, we'd be all ears, quite frankly, because I think we've sort of dotted around what it could be for a little while now. But I see the point you're making.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerry Wright.
Thanks, Chair. Just hopefully a couple of quick ones from me. On page 43, when you're looking at the updates regarding the workforce, as said, the target is to embed annual apprenticeship recruitment, and then in terms of the progress update, you're only doing recruitment campaigns in 2 yearly cycles. So obviously that's not annual, that's a biennial basis. So when will the annual process happen, or is it now going to be biennial instead? And in which case, does something need amending there? And then a very small second one from me on page 51. The review of the operational estate, the deadline for that is given as July 2023. Does that need to change? Because this is part of the sort of planned work. Is that a typo, and should it say 2024? Thank you.
Chair, in terms of the first item raised by Councillor Wright, I can see we've got Lynn Donovan, who's our head of HR, on the call, so I'm sure Lynn will take that point.
Ross.
Chair,
Yeah.
sorry, I just to pick up the second point. I understand that because the self-assessment is 22-23, at that point in time, that would be correct. Well, I know that, we're now here in 23-24, but it was sort of correct at the sort of frequent or the period then at this point ends. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you. Lynn Donovan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As Dave has suggested, I'm able to respond to the question on apprentices. We had funding given for annual apprentice programmes. And what we found when we reviewed it was to use the money on an annual basis, we wouldn't be giving the apprentices the best opportunity. Because we need the funding for their salary each year. So we've got programs of 2 years to give them the best opportunities in terms of training, learning, and hopefully for them to have the skills, knowledge and experience to be able to secure employment at the end of us. We weren't able to change the action because that was an action that was set within the performance assessment. So acknowledge that the response isn't quite in terms of what the action was, but we slightly changed where we were going with this to give the apprentices the best opportunity. So all reports going forward and any references to apprentices would be making reference to the fact that the programme is running on a 2-yearly basis.
Okay, yeah, that does now make sense, even though, yeah, in terms of reading the report, it kind of doesn't. So it's yeah, hopefully remember for next time round. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you. Viv Pearson.
Hi, thanks very much, Dave and Ros, for the very comprehensive piece of work on this particular report. It's soul destroying sometimes when you get people like us wandering into your world and saying, oh, what about this and what about that? However, saying that, for me, I think there's something on that strategic level that I'd like to see. And that is you've done an awful lot of work in terms of reviewing the detail about what's been done in terms of those actions. But what I would like to see is an improved visibility of your actual self-assessment level overall on a strategic basis and in each of the sections. And as you said in your presentation, Dave, that could be included in something like a summary assessment. Can I just have your thoughts on that?
Dave?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you at all. I think that sort of summary assessment, whether it be it's by sort of subject matter by subject matter or an overall summary, and how we arrive and justify that would be something that's worth us looking at. Isn't particularly easy to do because it's still that element of self-reflection, self-judgment. And I think certainly when we produce the 23-24 report, I think you'll see that sort of activity and that strategic level that you refer to has very much been sort of adopted in part of our sort of mobilising Team Caerphilly approach, which we're doing with a view to the financial challenges we face. So I think we've got that strategic oversight and that strategic approach there at the moment. But I think your point around a sort of summary judgment is a really good one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dave.
Sorry, Chair,
okay,
I've just got two other additional detailed points. And this relates to page 40 and specifically on the recruitment and the workforce. Would it be possible to include the vacancy rate or the vacancy numbers in that table, as this would provide the wider context to the risk that you're trying to manage? And then the second point is on page 49 in the table. Could you confirm that this is the evaluation of costs at 2019, or has that value been updated with an inflationary percentage or any other operating?
Dave?
Could I ask Lynn Donovan again to come in on the first point, and then perhaps Steve, you could pick the second. Brodie, is it okay? Thank you.
Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. We currently don't hold the vacancy rates. Our HR payroll system didn't have the capability to hold it, but we've just upgraded the system. So we're in the process of putting that information into the system. So we're hoping within the next couple of months, we are going to be able to report on vacancies, because that's the piece of the staff information that's missing for managers. So whilst managers would know their own vacancies, in terms of being able to report on it, that is something we've not been able to do. But as I said, within the next couple of months, we are going to be able to do that.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay, is that okay, Viv?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
If I think it's
thank you.
Brodie's going to take the second point about the inflationary costs.
Yeah, the table that was included covering the condition costs, they are the actual costs that came from the condition survey, so there's no uplift that's been added or any calculation. That's the figures that go into the system from the survey, and then the next round of surveys will pick up on the current costs as we go forward with the next tranche of surveys.
Sorry, Chair, could I just ask a supplementary on that? Thanks, Brodie. That's really interesting. Firstly, when is the next round of surveys due?
They commenced last month, I believe.
And you'll have that information?
It's a 3-year rolling programme.
Okay.
So every 3 years the buildings are chosen and surveyed, and then we have fresh information.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Brodie.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all. Councillor Chacon Dawson.
Right, on page 31, in the report it says we brought 104 empty properties back into use. When you say use, is that they've got tenants in them, they're able to be rented, or they are being rented? Because it's not clear as to what the position is, because if they are still in the progress of being repaired, then that to me is not in use. So I just want clarification on the interpretation of what you've put in that report.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I can take that one for you, Councillor Dawson. The 104 properties we referred to are properties that are actually being finalised. The various improvement and building work has been completed, and they have been let or in the process of being let to tenants.
Right, that's great. It's just that you didn't make it clear on the report, so I just wanted that clarification. And also page 56, there's talks about progress on or lack of progress on the streaming of reporting data, that there's a delay, but it doesn't state what how it'll be improved, or what will be done to improve it.
Shall I take that one, Chair?
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Councillor. The action itself refers to the automation of data. So the existing analysing and acquiring of data is standard and robust, but via different forms of Excel and different systems. So this was relating specifically to a project like proof of concept about whether we could automate it using Power BI. We set up a research team and started seeing how we could automate it. A lot of authorities have gone down the road of showing dashboards. What we found was, though, that we needed a set of skills that were almost programming, not quite, but we didn't have those set of skills, and it was a long learning curve. And then with our data, we like to have analysis of narrative. What does it mean? What is it telling us? And because the dashboards are very attractive, but they are data driven, it doesn't enable you to have, for me to hand you an output of a report as per our system where you have a report here. So we did look at licenses Microsoft offer a sort of report function, but it requires another license. It requires another cost. So we did do quite a lot of research, but we found it wasn't really what we had intended. So what we will do is go back to sort of first principle about what did we want it to do. There are, my colleagues in Cardiff have made progress with that, so we're going to go visit them. But I think it's something I need to take back to our digital solutions boards, because we do have a couple of experts there, but there were a lot of reasons why that automation part of it didn't progress in that year. You know, sometimes as you work through things, you find out things you didn't realise, you thought it was going to be easy to do, and then the complications came. So I think we'll be taking it back to the Digital Solutions Board to say, if we want to progress with automation of data, how do we, you know, how do we sort of change that direction?
Thanks. It'll be interesting to find out what happens. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Nigel Yates.
Thank you, Chair. On the workforce planning, there's no mention in it rather about home working. I just wonder what the percentage of people work from home at the moment and what the plans are for the future. Not being mentioned.
Is that something that...
Lynn, are you able to come in at this point?
Yeah, certainly I can. We don't have any designated home workers within the council. We have a number of categories for our staff. We have a number of agile workers who can work from many locations, so it doesn't have to be home, it doesn't have to be the office. And the amount of time that they would work from home or in any location would be dependent on service needs. So we, as I say, we don't have staff that are dedicated to 50% of their time at home, 50% at work, at the office. It all does depend on service needs. And it's important as well that we also recognise we've got many frontline staff who are always at a location of work, whether it be a care home, a school, or in a residence home in the community. But as I said, we don't have home workers as such. And our agile working policies support agile and flexible working, but always it depends on needs of the service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There is another part to the question, sorry. I saw the term agile working, which I wasn't familiar with. I had to Google it, and there's a lot of words in it, but I didn't understand what the hell it meant, actually. What do you understand to be the meaning of agile working?
Agile working is supporting really what I've just said, is the opportunity for staff to undertake their duties in locations that best support the service delivery. So that could be in the office, that could be at home, that could be in another location, it could be in the community. But it's the opportunity to have some flexibility on where you undertake your duties where possible. But again, that depends on service needs. Does that help?
Yes, thank you for that. My
Thank
final
you.
question is concerning page 45. Statement there regarding invoice payments within 30 days. I don't think the figures there mean anything. It just says they paid so many invoices within 30 days. It should really record the percentage of invoices they paid or the value that they paid within 30 days of it against the total. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can take those comments on board, Mr. Yates. No problem. We'll have a look at that and take the comments on board. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you. Councillor Chaka Dawson, you've got your hand up again.
Yes, there's a Nigel's before me, or is that us? Legacy?
It's okay. Nigel has
all right.
Finished his question. Thanks.
What it was is I never noticed on about agile working. And anyways, that might be assessing how agile working is affecting well-being, or how the well-being program that we have implemented from an outside body is affecting employees, if it's value for money, if it's if it's serving its function and improving well-being. Would that ever be assessed? Or would not be in the self-assessment?
Thank you, Councillor. I don't. Steve Harris?
No, Lynn's going to respond, I think, to that,
Okay,
Chair.
sorry.
Thank you.
Lynn?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of productivity, that would be for managers to monitor wherever somebody is working, that would be for them. In terms of well-being, for staff that are able to work in an agile manner, we have undertaken a staff survey and the results have been really positive in terms of staff having flexibility, and being able to work agile. We're going to be doing another staff survey and we will pick that up again. But the important thing is that wherever staff are working, that they have support, that they are managed, and you know, that is constant wherever they work, and we've got processes in place. We've got an employee wellbeing strategy, as you've referenced, Councillor Chack and Dawson, but it's that contact with their managers and with their teams that we need to ensure we keep doing wherever people are working. We don't want any of our staff to be isolated or to feel isolated. But as I said, it was really positive, the results we had from the survey, but we don't want to just make assumptions everything is still fine. We want to keep asking those questions and to have a view on that corporately. So we will pick that back up in the survey that we're going to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel, you've still got your hand up. Did you have another question, or? That's okay. Thank you. And now it's my turn. Joe Williams, one of the other lay independent members, wasn't able to be here today, so she forwarded some detailed questions to me. I've forwarded those to the relevant officers, and they will answer those questions, and we'll be included in those answers following the meeting today. I just wanted to make a comment on the fact that this is the second report that you've had to put together. When it came to us last year, I made some points about in the comments regarding the governance of the council, which is our role, and asked that reference to governance and audit and scrutiny is put into the document. I can see that there are a number of points in there where it refers to us. Something I'd like to put out there for perhaps future reports is that you've used a number of hyperlinks in the report to take you to further information, to get more knowledge about those particular points in the report. I'm wondering whether there's an opportunity that in the future we could have a hyperlink, say, to what the role and the function of the Governance and Audit Committee is, the different scrutiny committees. It's just something that I think might make the report a little bit more interesting. But that's something to just bear in mind for the future. Just one last point on page 38 of the actual report. You've got reference there to some things that should have been done in March 2023, and you've got red boxes, limited progress, no progress. I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more information about why that is the case, and possibly is it that it now for the following report that those will have been done. Steve, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to pick that one up. The first item in the table you've referred to is about strengthening the links between the corporate plan and the emerging transformation programme and the medium-term financial plan. Our original transformation strategy was actually approved back in June 2019. But of course, we all know what happened in 2020 with the pandemic, and obviously about the cost of living crisis, etc. So that led to a lot of finance resources being diverted on addressing those issues at the time. We've been refreshing the medium-term financial plan, as you know. We refer to it in this document. We now are potentially facing a savings requirement of around 47 million moving forward. So what we'll be doing over the coming months is aligning the MTFP and the projects that are coming out of the Mobilising Team Caerphilly Transformation Programme to ensure that they're all joined up. So to answer your question, yes, this will be addressed and you will see progress on that in the coming months. The other one is the reserve strategy. We've recently taken another report to our Joint Scrutiny Committee on reserves. We're also undertaking a review of financial regulations at the present time. That will be linked in with the review of the reserve strategy. So once we've done that, we will then refresh the reserve strategy to reflect what's in the revised financial regulations. And again, we'll be expecting to complete that within the next 2 to 3 months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Steve. If there's no further questions on the self-assessment report, the recommendation is that we've, as a committee, have been asked to review the draft self-assessment report and, if necessary, make recommendations for changes to the conclusions or actions the council intends to take. So we have to vote on this. So would someone like to move?
I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder?
I'll second that, Councillor Adams.
Thank you. And we'll wait for the vote. Okay, that's been carried. Thank you very much. I can see that Mark Jones from Audit Wales has managed to join us. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Okay, we went ahead of you to deal with that agenda item. So we'll just go back now to agenda item 5, which is a verbal update from yourself. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, and apologies. I had IT access problems, so I got in eventually, but sorry for the delay. I'll provide a verbal update. I'll mention our financial audits first, and then I'll come on to the performance audits. My performance audit colleagues can't be here today, so I'll update on their behalf. So in terms of the financial audit work since you last met, there's the Blackwood Arts Centre charity account. We certified that at the end of January. The Charity Commission deadline each year is the 31st of January. So that was submitted to the Charity Commission a few days before that deadline. That set of accounts is audited. The audited account is approved by Cabinet. And then once Cabinet approve and have it signed, then it is certified by the Auditor General. So that happened in January. We're currently going through the council's grants that require audit. You have 6 of those. We've certified 2 of those grants. 2 are due to be certified very soon, and there are 2 that are ongoing. So that's the position on the grant audits for 22-23. And we are in the process of auditing your 22-23 annual accounts, your statement of accounts for the whole authority. We're making some good. Well, we are making good progress on that audit. Met with Steve recently, Steve Harris. We're anticipating to conclude the core testing by early March, maybe possibly by the end of February. There are some issues that we're working through with officers in 1 or 2 areas that need some extended work. Those accounts are going to be considered by the full council in the middle of April. I think it's the 14th of April or thereabouts. So the situation there is that the accounts, the aim is that those accounts will be the audit of them will be done, and there'll be like a period of maybe 5-6 weeks then until that kind of full council meeting takes place, and therefore certification, would be in mid-April on that front. So that's the financial audit work. In terms of the performance audit work, the team are in the middle of a counter fraud review at the moment, and they're about to start a review early in March around cybersecurity. So those are the core local pieces of work. On Tuesday of this week, we've issued the quarterly update. So it didn't quite make this committee, but the quarterly update was issued this week on Tuesday. And we understand that I think that gets shared routinely with GAC members, this committee's members. So some of you may have received and seen that. And it does go on the agenda for your next meeting. So that's a written update that covers the financial audit and the performance audit work. By the time you meet next, in terms of financial audit content, it'll probably be a little bit out of date, but it'll certainly be relatively up to date in terms of the performance audit work, I would have thought. So that's it on the financial audit and the performance audit front in terms of a verbal update, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark, for that. It's good to see that all seems to be working well, and I'm looking forward to talking with some of your team next week on this this review of counter fraud. Have any of our members got any questions for Mark at this point? Okay, it looks like we are all content. Thank you very much, Mark. And that's okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, move on now to agenda item 7, where the committee is asked to note the results of the latest self-assessment against the public sector internal audit standards and progress against the action plan from the previous external assessment. This report is for noting, and Deb Grono, you're going to talk to this. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So you have in front of you the report of the most recent self-assessment undertaken of the public sector internal standards compliance, and also to update committee on the progress made in respect of any actions outstanding on the previous self-assessment and external review. So the action plan from the previous external assessment is attached on Appendix 1. There is quite a bit of detail there. Apologies for the volume, but the standard is quite considerably long document and has quite a few requirements against which performance and compliance has to be assessed. And then also, as a second assessment is second appendix, sorry, is just a summary outcome of my self-assessment, just so that you were aware now that this self-assessment is underpinned by a number of documents as evidence as well to come to those conclusions, and those will be going to our external reviewer very shortly. And once that's done, a report will be coming back to you on the findings of that external assessment. So I can welcome any questions.
Thank you, Deb, for that. Much appreciated. Do you have any questions? I believe Councillor Chuck and Dawson, you were going to ask something.
Right. Not page. 5.7. It talks about the majority of requirements being completed, but not quite all of them. And I noticed on page 90 that there was in the table minor issue noted internal assessments, and another minor issue in proficiency in the performance standards. Do these two items relate to each other? That's page 90 and 5.7 in the report. I linked them, but I might be wrong. Can you clarify if they're connected?
Right, is it 95?
No, page 90.
Page 90.
Or maybe it was 95, but there's two, like, everything else is in the green, and there's just two issues.
Yes, it is.
Minor
Yes,
issues.
it's those. Yeah,
Right,
so we've got
brilliant. I was
standards. Yeah, standard 1311 and what's the other one? Yeah, 1210. So performance standard 1210 covers the basic IT audit skills, proficiencies, and requirement for more technical experience for IT audit. So that is something that, like many other internal audit teams in local government, that requires a large amount of technical expertise and skill to be able to perform those IT audits. So the staff have got obviously a lot of knowledge, skills and experience in terms of using systems as users, but in terms of the technical requirements, there is we don't have those skills, so that as a mitigation, that would be met by, if the need arose, to obtaining support from an external provider as and when that would be required. So that would meet the demands of that part of the standard. And then standard 1311 is covering information recording, management information recording. So I've mentioned that's a partial non-compliance. As you know, we've got a management system which records our audits, allows us to track our recommendations, allows us to report to yourselves on performance, and also allows us to report to the individual auditees as well. So we've come to the end of our 5-year contract on that, and there's some, I suppose, wish list really that we're talking about, where we think we can improve some of the reporting to yourselves and also to our auditees. So that's going to be borne in mind when we develop the spec for this procurement exercise that's going to be commenced very shortly.
Thank you, Deb.
Could I one more question on page 78, the PDRs, performance development reviews. Are these similar to appraisals, or is it like a self-assessment of continuing professional development? I was just trying to understand what the PDRs were.
Yeah, the personal development reviews have actually, since this document was actually issued, the original action plan, the council's now adopted a My Time methodology, so which are performance reviews. So those are going to be used. It is just performance development and review of the staff. CPD is recorded elsewhere because, again, there's a requirement under the standard for all members of the team to have an element of CPD to make sure that their professional knowledge and skills are maintained up to date. So a number of the staff are actually doing professional examinations, which covers that off, and they're required to do their own CPT as part of those professional qualifications as well. So we've got all that recorded.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Viv Pearson, you wanted to ask something?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Deb. Very comprehensive report as always. I've got a bit of a query in relation to Appendix 1. It's most probably my misunderstanding of the way that it's presented. Can you explain in the column headed actions for consideration what the comment "not considered an issue in the self-assessment" means, and how this relates to the comments in the column headed external assessor recommended actions, where they include a comment that work needs to be done, for example, standard 1321 on 82 and standard 2010 on page 84, And then could you provide more detail on how the assessment is undertaken and how the outcome is derived on page 90?
Okay, so this document goes back to the original self-assessment and subsequent external assessment that was performed back in 2018 and 19 and reported to previous members of the audit committee prior to the previous election. So the requirement of the standard is as it is. The self-assessment was the 2017-18 self-assessment outcome. The actions for consideration were then those comments really by the head of audit at the time. The column then labelled external assessor was what the external assessor commented on subsequent to the self-assessment. Then the following column is agreed actions, person responsible timescale, were the reflections on those comments and whether they were taken on board or not back in 2018-19. So you could see against 1321, the comment was to be considered in the reporting process, internal audit manager, to be completed by the 31st of 3rd, 2019. So, and then progress update is my review interpretation as far as that specific point is updated as a result of my self-assessment, which is reported in the second appendix. So apologies for any confusion in that, but I suppose it's to show you really how the process has evolved and the previous recommendations of the previous external assessment have been embedded in the processes going forward.
Thanks, Deb. I suppose my query would be if the head of internal audit back in 2018, who completed that, said they didn't think there was an issue, but the external assessor did think there was something that needed to be improved upon. Would you see that being replicated now, or do you think you're more sophisticated in your understanding of self-assessment?
Well, at some circumstances, I suppose a self-assessment is entirely subjective, and you can have two people do self-assessment, and you may broadly agree, but there may be some nuances of slightly different interpretation or disagreements, perhaps put it, on certain actions. But that is what it was historically, and is a record of what was reported at the time. And myself, I've come in and done my review. Obviously, it will now have to go through an external assessment. So there is a possibility. It's a different external assessor as well. So it's possible that there may be some minor points where there may be some, again, I won't say disagreement, but slight differences in opinion on certain aspects of the individual elements of the standards.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I think that's something I'm just trying to work through in my mind about that journey that you're on in terms of that self-assessment and becoming more self-aware of issues and concerns and things that you can improve. I think just to pick up on the last point that I made, you've mentioned that you utilise a range of information to inform your self-assessment and therefore the outcome that you've arrived at in page 90. Could you just sort of explain what sort of evidence you'd be looking at?
Right. Yeah, backing up Appendix 2, I've got my internal assessment of every single line on this. And documents that would inform this process would be the charter, for example, financial regs, the My Time process PDRs, the record I've got of staff CPD, the information I have on staff's declaration of declarations of interest, conformance with other internal policies and procedures. Really is each individual line of the standard. You can, there's quite a lot of commonality. For example, the audit charter applies to quite a lot of these aspects. but there are some other more nuanced policies, internal procedures, etc., which may only apply to one or two of them. So I have all that in the background as evidence. You know, I could have put that detailed information to the committee, but it would have been, I don't know, another 30 or 40 pages. So it's quite a big document, but you know, it is there, and that information will be shared with the external assessor as well, and they'll be able to interrogate that and determine for themselves whether or not, you know, it does meet the needs of the standard. Just for information, I'm actually doing the same thing for another local authority as their external assessor. So that does give you a really good opportunity to self-reflect as well on how other local authorities are meeting the requirements of the standards as well, and where, you know, there are obviously commonalities and where there are slightly different nuances in how you know, we do different things within different local authorities to meet the needs of that particular council's requirements.
Thanks, Deb. That's very, very helpful, because that really does sort of set the context around your assurance, the assurance process in itself. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Before I bring Steve Harris in, I just wanted to pick up on what you just said there, Deb. When the external assessor comes in at some point soon, do we know who, from what council that person or persons would be?
Right, there's South Wales Head of Audit Group, and this is agreed on a cyclical basis, but there is some element of flexibility if there are changes in personalities employed at various local authorities. So we're penciled in to have Neath Talbot, and I'm doing Monmouth. There's been a change of head of audit within Monmouth as well. So there's been a little bit of a shuffle around, but that was pre-agreed. You don't have the same person repeatedly, and they try to make sure that there's no previous conflict of interest. For example, the head of audit in Monmouth has gone to work for the shared service. So those two, well, he was Monmouth and Newport. So obviously he can't be involved now in their external assessments because he built the system. So, you know, there is that element brought into the process.
Okay, thank you. Steve Harris, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just very briefly, thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, really, the role of the external assessment. I mean, as Deb said, you can do a self-assessment. That's your view of the world in terms of the service you're providing, etc. But what the external assessment does is obviously gives me as the 151 officer, but you as a committee, an extra layer of assurance in terms of the outcome of the assessment. As with any audit and any review or self-assessment, there will be differences, but they're obviously reported to you as a committee, and you will then have an opportunity to give a view on those differences and whether actions are required or not. So I just wanted to clarify that point. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you again, Steve. If no one else has got any points to make, then all we have to do is note this this report. So it seems that we're all content with that. Thanks. So agenda item 8, and it's Deb again, to present to us update on internal audit report recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'll assume that you've read the report in a certain amount of detail. So just to go through the salient points for yourselves. So every audit that we perform as it goes through the process, if the recommendations noted, they feed into our recommendation tracker, which is a module which is held in our internal audit management system. And those recommendations then take on a life of their own once the audit is completed. So those recommendations will have a risk rating of high, medium or merits attention, which we've got a framework against which we assess those risk ratings, which I think has been shared with the committee previously. So, you know, we have some sort of criteria, I say some sort, is a criteria where we risk rate those recommendations. And the recommendation tracker also requires us to name a named person, at least one, or subsequently another person as well, is shared, and an expected due date against which we expect the recommendation to be completed. So in the report, we have information on the total number of recommendations that have been generated since the system went live in 2019. Now, appreciate that there's a lot of numbers, and maybe question might be said, well, why are you holding this information? What this historical information allows us to look at is over time where large amounts of recommendations, perhaps of different risk priorities, have been raised in different service areas, and allows us to look and see whether or not, we're getting a lot of high risk points or findings in a service area which was previously well controlled, etc. So that allows us to monitor that. So you can see that over time we've generated 2,187 individual recommendations over. I actually have split the directorates into social services and housing, and education and corporate services separately, as a request from a member of the audit committee previously, as the comment was made that education is schools, and they've got slightly different circumstances to possibly recommendations and findings that you may be raising in terms of internal corporate services service areas. So that is on table 5.10. And as I said, the recommendations are then given a due date. That's with in conjunction with agreement with ourselves. So generally, the higher risk recommendation, the more immediate the action that needs to be taken to implement it. However, that is done in consultation with the auditee. So if something requires a policy to be developed and written, then that may need quite a bit more time than something that needs just an immediate instruction to someone to do an action or to cease an action. So those dates are agreed with the auditee. They then placed into our system, and periodically then we will do a report and look at completion of those recommendations against the due date. Now, I would caveat that by saying that our recording of the implementation of the agreed recommendation is down to the auditee actually advising us. So we will remind those auditees where these recommendations are approaching due date and or even overdue. But we do rely on them telling us and updating us and giving us confirmation that the actions have been put in place and the dates at which those actions were implemented. So the table then in 514 will show you information on the overdue recommendations. So out of 2,187, we have 49 overdue recommendations reported at the time I drew this report up. I've actually now been advised that that number should be less because there were some recommendations actioned prior to the 31st of December, but the information's only come through to me in the last few days, and obviously not in time for me to update this information for you. So those recommendations will now be updated within our system, and the next time this report is given to yourselves, obviously, that will be reflected. And also, this was at the 31st December. There may very well be recommendations that were due for the end of January, because obviously we are in a dynamic situation, and it is only a snapshot at a point in time. So new recommendations become created, they fall due, some are completed, etc. So if there are any questions, I'd be welcome to take them.
Yeah, Steve Harris, you wanted to say something before we get into that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In relation to this report, you do get it periodically, obviously. You may have noticed in the action plan that there's been a request previously for information to be provided to the committee in terms of the nature of the overdue recommendations. We've undertaken to do that, and future reports you will receive now from April onwards, where there are potentially high or medium risks which are overdue, we will provide more context and detail around the nature of what those recommendations are and the reasons why they haven't been implemented. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We've got a number of questions, but if you don't mind, I'll just jump in here because it is relevant to what we had just been talking about. We get this report now and we see that there's some overdue recommendations. So that's obviously looking back. Is this doable? That if you, as the audit manager, Deb, felt that you weren't getting the information back that you need from a specific service area, could you let the committee know prior to a formal committee meeting that we might consider inviting the head of service to sort of explain why those recommendations haven't been met?
I'll pick that one up if you like, Chair. Yes, we can do that. That's not a problem. I will discuss with Deb in advance of this report being presented whether there are any issues in terms of people not engaging, or if the reasons given for not addressing recommendations are not robust. And maybe you and I could pick that up in a conversation. And if you feel that it's appropriate that that particular head of service is called into the committee to explain the reasons themselves, we can agree that between us.
Thank you. Councillor Chacken-Dawson.
The term cross-cutting, I'm assuming that you mean from this that there are risks that border more than one department, such as IT, because different departments might use the same software. Who's in charge of reducing these risks? Do different departments collaborate?
Okay, so the examples of the types of cross-cutting audits we've done so far is we did a corporate review of safeguarding, where one single audit programme was used across a number of, well, in fact, all heads of service were asked to actually participate. Each head of service had their own report back. They were consolidated in reports for the director, and also social services and the council's safeguarding officer was also copied into that process. So in some of the cases, the recommendation would actually be attributable to that head of service. For example, they need to make sure that all their members of staff have at least a level 1 safeguarding training. That is down to head of service and their individual service managers to manage that. There might be another recommendation, which is that certain material advice is available, and that is actually the responsibility of the safeguarding area of social services to actually provide that material and disseminate it to the head of service or service managers to actually pass to their service managers and staff in the teams. So each individual recommendation in those sort of areas is actually targeted to whoever should be responsible for implementing it, whether it's at the corporate level, in which case that is cross-cutting entire authority, or a number of directorates, or actually on a local level within that service area, or individual just team, depending obviously on the nature of each individual finding.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Kerry Wright.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report, Deb. And I think you managed to answer the questions, or a lot of the questions I was going to ask already in your presentation earlier. Because I was asking about, I can understand, yeah, where you say you keep the numbers in now about tracking whether or not a certain area generates more high risk items, etc. But then in terms of, you also mentioned that the system, you're coming to the end of a 5-year contract. Is that the end of the contract for this Pentana system from which this report comes? And if so, in terms of then reporting going forward, yes, the ongoing tracking of the headline, if you like, of the total number and then in which area is good, but also then in terms of making the report meaningful and understanding for us, especially obviously in regard to anything overdue, it potentially be interesting to know how overdue things are. For example, how long potentially some areas have taken to update who they've completed, and so would recording quite a lot of these things in terms of how many have been audits done and issues found on an annual basis be more helpful with then, or a rolling 12-month basis, to bring the numbers down perhaps into more manageable pieces, rather than, because you've got quite a lot of completeds that might very well have been completed way back in 2019, 2020, etc. And so we don't need to know about them. And so maybe that is something we can look at in terms of making this report more meaningful and understandable for us. And then the supplementary then on what you said with regard to, you rely on the areas to update you that they've completed what they need to complete. Does that then, once you're informed, do you then do a follow-up, if you like, to check that the completion is what you were expecting in terms of, you know, to sign off yourselves that you're happy that the overdue items have been completed? Thank you.
Okay, hopefully I'll cover all your questions, but if I miss something out, please let me know. Okay, so first of all, a new system, any new system that we do procure, we'll make sure that we'll have functionality to allow us to transition our existing data into a new system, and hopefully there'll be, you know, no loss of any data integrity. I mean, obviously, particularly over the current recommendations, that will be something that will be an absolutely must-have in any system that we reprocure. Second of all, the age, that information is available. That I do have that. It's just not in the report, but that's something that can be reported on. I think Steve has already alluded to the fact that we will be giving you some further elaboration on this data the next time this is reported. So that is something certainly that can be given to you, because that is available. And then follow-ups. Okay, that's quite an interesting question. The responsibility for the risk, the management of that risk and the mitigation of that risk sits with the service manager, head of service or director. So we do, if it's a very high risk issue and requires a specific action, then we may very well ask for evidence, depending on what that is. I mean, usually it can be something quite simple as, you know, introducing a new procedure, and we say, can we have just a copy of your new policy document or your new procedure, and we will keep that then for future reference on our permanent files. So that very much depends on the individual item, the recommendation, whether we do to follow up that service area in a period anyway. So that I think is on an individual basis. Have I missed anything? Sorry.
No, you seem to have covered it. It does surprise me that, you know, you are even for the low risk, it's on the head of services say so. They let you know, yeah, we've done that now. Whereas, well, in you know what I'm used to is, you know, if internal audit make a recommendation and then it's agreed it'll be done by, and then you're informed it's done, there's normally then, yeah, okay, prove it is the question that's asked. So like you said, with the high risk, if it's something like update a procedure, you see that procedure's been updated, etc. I'm just concerned that potentially there is, the risk of, heads of service perhaps, informing you that something's been completed when they perhaps have misunderstood, obviously, reports coming from those underneath them that it's completed. And then if you're not due to do a new audit of that area for a while, something could actually be overdue, remain overdue by accident, if you like, rather than by design. Never mind, obviously, the far worse by design situation.
Well, but I would say really that if a service manager head of service states to us that they've performed a certain recommended procedure or action, and actually that hasn't been implemented, and then that does come to light as a result of subsequent follow-up actions or an incident or occurrence, then that would be reported to the Section 151 officer. That that would be considered quite as I think significant failing on behalf of that service area. Doesn't tend to happen, and as I said, where areas are high risk anyway, inherently high risk, we will do follow-ups. But unfortunately, we have to rely on heads of service because that is their role. If you go back to the third line of defence model for internal audit, then the first two lines of defence are the council's own procedures and service managers, heads of service and directors. We are the third line of defence, not the first line of defence in terms of internal control and monitoring.
Oh, exactly. I'm just sorry to come back on you, Deb, but then you're still internal as a line of defence, whereas anything that then does emerge, etc., would go external, and there's reputational risk to the council, etc. That's why I'm thinking, is there a resource issue there for your department, etc., in terms of, a need perhaps to have that assurance then? Yes, obviously we trust our heads of service and we trust all the staff obviously to be doing their jobs thoroughly and properly, but yeah, if you've identified an issue through one of your internal audits, as I said, the first question I'd always ask, if I've asked someone to do something and they've said, yep, I've done it, I'd be saying, prove it. Send some evidence over, for example, and then your auditors themselves, you can then say, oh yeah, that's all done, we can close that down, and then carry on then obviously with the current business as usual work in progress.
Steve Harris, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just important to stress that there's a limit to what the audit team can do. There's obviously limited capacity. There's an extensive work programme in terms of undertaking the audits, but most of these audits are followed up. So clearly, if we were put in a position where we were told that something had been addressed and it was found on the follow-up audit that wasn't the case, then that would be referred to me. And clearly, the audit programme is only part of the governance within the organisation. If there was a failing in an area that was linked to an audit recommendation that hadn't been implemented, then obviously that would also be picked up through our governance processes. So there are other lines of defence where these things would be picked up and potentially referred to me as a Section 151 officer.
Thanks. Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely for the time being, obviously, because others have got their hands up wanting to speak. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Deb and to Steve.
Thanks. Viv Pearson.
Thanks, Steve and Deb. My query is similar, I suppose, and I'd just like to pick up on some of the points that Kerry's made. I'm not going to reiterate them. But on page 100, obviously, we've got that table that says high, medium and merits attention, and they're based on the overdue numbers. Taking on board the potential services lack of participation in a feedback process, and picking up on Kerry's points in your responses, Can you explain what escalation process is in place to deal with these overdue recommendations? And how does each director represent this in the statement of assurance that they each sign as part of the annual governance statement process?
Thank you. Well, all those 49 individual recommendations have been chased and followed up. Steve has got the full detail of those individual recommendations and has that detail. And obviously, as previously reported, that detail will be coming to you now in the next time these recommendations are reported. And also, you in the committee have the gift to ask for heads of service or details of individual audits to which those recommendations relate, to come to the committee and have inquiries then made of them by yourselves of why those recommendations haven't been implemented, either at all or you know, within a reasonable time frame.
Thanks. Is that okay, Viv? Yep. Okay. Nigel, do you want to ask something?
Yeah, just a sort of a clarification. The 49 that we just talked about, that includes the 19 non-responsive items. I was thinking that particular line says no response received and assumed or accepted. So that means it's either they were on holidays and they haven't sorted anything out yet, or they completely disagree with your recommendation and you haven't got back to you yet. Is that right?
I think that those 19 would relate to schools that were on action short strike up until, I want to say, October, where audits had been completed or part completed prior to the start of the industrial action. And one part of the industrial action was that those heads of those schools that were participating were not responding to any audit inquiries whatsoever. So probably I would say that in most of those cases, a significant number relate to that. However, there are some service areas where audits are issued in draft and we don't get any responses. There's a small number, but again, you know, if they would be reported to Steve and escalated to Steve, and then to the head service and potentially the directors in those cases. And again, you know, yourselves have got the power to request further information on those, or for officers and heads of service to come to the committee to again provide you with answers to any questions you may have in respect of those. I don't have the detail of that 19 to hand, I'm sorry, but if you want that for you know, further committees, then that could be provided.
That's fine. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Viv, you wanted to come back on something?
Sorry, yes, I think it's a question for Steve, actually. Now I've got that escalation process in my head fully explained. Obviously, when you get the report to say X, Y, and Z is outstanding and overdue, you obviously have, as been explained, a conversation with the head of service and the director. At what point does that surface? So say that arrives at the end of the financial year when you're writing the annual governance statement. Do you represent that in your element of that particular report, or would you expect that to be hands up of the director concerned?
Yeah, I think the key thing to stress is the overdue recommendations at the moment are not material from my point of view. But again, in terms of lines of defence, when the directors are asked to contribute to the annual governance statement process, they must review the checklists completed by their heads of service, and they must sign a statement saying that they are fully satisfied with what the heads of service have submitted, and there are not any material issues within the service area. So that process exists. But clearly, if Deb came to me and discussed an issue that I thought was material, I would take that up directly with the director.
Thanks, Steve. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again, both of you, for answering those detailed questions. Thanks. So we just have to note this report, and if everyone is content, then consider it noted. Thanks. Agenda item 9 is the Regulator Recommendation Tracker Progress Update. And Ros Roberts, you're going to speak to this. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you'll be aware that we bring this update to you twice a year, although our corporate management team review it quite frequently in between. So this time, this is as of the end of January. In the summary, it notes that we've got 14 recommendations now on the register, and we've had 4 new ones that have been added. There are 2 that we now believe are complete and have moved into day-to-day business. And if you agree, that would leave the 12 outstanding. Paragraph 2.3 notes we've had 2 new reports since then. And in paragraph 5.7 and 5.8, that gives you more detailed context on what those reports are. Waste management strategy and the setting of the council's wellbeing objectives. And just to move to 5.1, that normally just gives you a snapshot of movement from the last time that you received the report. And the further paragraphs up to 5.8 give you a little bit more context from the spreadsheet. 5.5, the homelessness one, that's the 2 that the service feels strongly now completed in terms of a task and finish project, start and end time, and give more detail on that. So lastly, just to note that 5.11 gives you some information about future work outputs that you might see that will be coming along shortly, make their way onto the register. And as you know, Appendix A then gives you more of the detail across on the actual tracking. So really just over to you for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ros. Now, when we met earlier, nobody did indicate that they wanted to ask any questions. Can I just double check that anyone has changed their mind at all? Doesn't look like it, so we can just move straight forward to the vote. That the committee give their agreement by a vote to close the proposals that are noted as completed within Appendix A. So could someone move, please?
Move, Nigel Yates.
Thank you. Seconder.
Adams.
Thanks, Mike. So you can see the voting. And that's carried. Thank you. Agenda items 10 and 11. Nothing has come forward to be called in for discussion about the RIPER Act or declarations of gifts and hospitality. But I believe someone wanted to ask just a general question about this. Councillor Chacken-Dawson.
It's not a question. My poll's not working properly, but I voted for.
Okay, thank you.
It came up, but it didn't finish going through.
Okay, well that's even more carried. Thank you. Councillor Gary Enright.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I had a question around the RIPER process, if you remember.
Yes. Yeah.
Are we at that point? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It was just to find a little bit more information about that exercise. Who pays? How much did it cost? Where does the budget sit? And a supplementary request, really, if any further exercises come before the committee, if we can have a little bit more detail in the report. Again, how much did it cost? Where did the budget sit? You know, what is the budget for these type of things, etc., etc. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Gary. Are you able to answer that, Stephen?
No,
No, there we are.
unfortunately. No, it's just obviously we'll refer that to the author of the report and make sure that that's reflected in the next version of the report that's submitted.
Yes, I mean we understood that, you know, there was nothing had to come before us, but it was just a general question to give us an idea of the costs of this. So thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this afternoon's Governance and Audit Committee. Thank you, members. Thank you, officers. I declare the meeting closed. The webcast will be stopped. Members attending in Penarth House, can I ask you to remain seated until the webcast has ended? And members attending remotely, you may now hang up. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thanks all.